Speaking of next level, there is the next level of teams, which is teams that only have one spot left, whether it be a designated player or U22, and there are nine of those teams. It's Charlotte, Chicago, Minnesota, Nashville, New York City, Red Bull, Orlando, Philly, and RSL. Now, what's interesting about this group is that of these nine teams, only two have an active designated player spot open, and that's Real Salt Lake and the mighty, mighty New York Red Bulls. And I think those are the teams that we need to focus on in this group because U22 guys aren't really instant impact guys. Maybe they take a year to get under their feet or develop, or maybe they honestly some of them may spend a year in MLS Next Pro. Like I think that's a stretch, but you never know. With these two clubs, though, you're looking at teams that can make instant improvements with literally one signature. So if you're these two teams, are there any spots on the pitch that you would focus on as a ball knower of MLS like you are?
Oh man, I feel that. So I was listening to your predictions episode, as everybody should. You were talking about, you were like, oh, I was not high on RSL. And then I had the conversation with them and they convinced me. First of all, I think you're a fraud for that. You should stick to your guns.
Stop it.
But that's beyond the point. I do not like this. I'm sorry to say, I do not like this RSL build. I mean, they definitely needed to change things up. It sounded like, I feel like you probably were telling me about this, but they like it seemed like there was some kind of toxicity going on in the locker room at the end of that season, especially because Aranjo just completely fell off the map at the end there. It just feels like a little bit of a mess of whatever they got going on right now. Like they need a bit of a rebuild. It feels like if I was going to pick a spot for a designated player, for me, striker jumps out 100%. Like their striker spot is in dire need at the moment. They did not replace Aranjo right now. I was just pulling up their transfer market list. Like it's three 17-year-olds, Forster Ajago, Arieth Pyle or Peel.
Peel, oh, that dude's gonna be a baller.
Like, you think so?
Yeah, we'll talk about we'll talk about him.
That's the spot I would go for them. I think they absolutely need a striker. I mean that maybe you got the high hopes for him, but I think he's still pretty young. He's 20. Like I'm not going to expect him to come and burst onto the scene and have like a Kucher type impact. So why not go? You don't need to go get like some 26-year-old striker. Just bring someone in that's a bit older. Give him a year or two to kind of develop, get into things, and really hit the ground running when that guy kind of ages out. The DP you bring in, but that's where I would go with it. That seems like a glaring hole to me.
Yeah, and that's for both groups, by the way, because Red Bull, after watching them in week one, Red Bull have always had a problem with the nine. They brought in experience, they brought in a bit of talent, but they lost a lot of pace. I mean, Choupo-Moting looks like me when I run. Emil Forsberg's not too far behind him, and then you got Lewis Morgan, who's like, "Am I just supposed to run daggers for 90 minutes? Like, what do you want me to do?" So I think we already have a designated player nine, but I don't think it would hurt us to get another one if this is if this is the build that we're going to use and use it on a little bit of pace. Now, for those of us who are in the know, a certain Timo Werner's name has started been floating around again. And last time this happened, we sat down and we talked about it. Was like, heck yeah, bring him in. Will be a great fit. We found him in the 4-2-2 as one of those wide attacking midfielders like Forsberg. He runs the flanks, can shift in, whatever, all that good stuff, right? Now we've gone more to a 3-4-2-1, 3-4-1-2, whatever you'd like to call it. Guess what? I still think Timo Werner fits in that system. Get this man in and let him run at the very top. Honestly, Choupo-Moting playing off him with Emil Forsberg there and then Lewis Morgan out on the wing, no problems at all because they've got the experience and the knowledge to play the game that we want to play while also not struggling for making 17 runs in behind every day. So I'd really like to see Timo Werner there for RSL, but I think they also need a DP9, right? I think they have these pieces around the attack, right? Marschuk, Gonçalves, Luna that are really, really decent, but they are not feeding the top of the diamond, if you will, with any sort of pizzazz, right? So I was really curious. I looked at the transfer market values just as a general guide of some of the players who they brought in at the nine role right now, right? Latte Loth and Denke are between like the 10 to 14 million dollar range. So I was like, all right, let me sneak through and I found some names that I thought would be just interesting to kind of think about, right? You got guys like
Man,
Anthony
this
Mar
man does his research. He was prepared.
this man, you think like I got to this point by myself without being prepared? You left me on an island and I had to survive, and this is where we go. This is how we do. Guys like Anthony Martial, for example, who are just hanging out in Greece right now, right? They are just. I think that would be a pretty easy, enticing uh, move to go for him. Julian Quinones, who was a big star in Liga MX, which is something that they are not afraid to do, right? Paging Christian Aranjo from Liga MX, right? I think that would be a really cool one. He's out in Qatar right now. I don't think you're matching Qatari money, but if he doesn't like life over there, I think you get him. If you want to keep recycling the MLS to Liga MX and back train, Georgios Giacomakis is in that range, and we've seen what happens when you bring in a high scoring goal getter from one team and into RSL. He continues that run. Now, I don't think Giacomakis is coming back based off of some of his comments, but there is my favorite one, the most interesting one that I found. Heading into the 2026 World Cup, you might be able to learn American home. And who's an American center forward who also is flexible enough to play in other positions, who hangs out in that kind of market value range, is Haji Wright. Now, I think Haji Wright would be really good with players like Diego Luna, Gonçalves, and Marschuk around him. Get just tons of service and finish. Do I think any of those guys are coming? No, of course not. Right? Like those are stretches. But to think, I don't think anybody looked at, Kevin Denke at a $14 million like, oh yeah, he's definitely MLS bound. So it's never out there as a never going to happen. But I'd really like to see them go and try and find somebody there.
I'll give you two things on Red Bull, just because I talked about RSL before. One, I think you guys never should have signed Choupo-Moting. I would not want him even as a TAM player, not in this system. You just cannot play the Red Bull system with Forsberg and Choupo-Moting. Neither of those guys are running. And then if you're making Lewis Morgan run, he's running for no reason. Like, you can't press with one person. So I genuinely, I think that was possibly the worst signing of the summer, if not the worst, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Besides the fact, I would say I agree with you, but I mean, you guys have a young Polish kid from the second division of Poland.
All right,
You know, you signed him for a
we're not
reason.
taking shots at Red Bull here. Calm down.
Why not? I
Because
haven't
you
had a
because you
chance
had
for
you
the last
had
couple
30
months.
episodes to do this and you passed on all of them. You missed your shot.
Why would I take Red Bull shots in like the RSL episode? That doesn't make any
It didn't
sense.
stop you before.
That's true. Well, because you bring them up all the time, so I'm gonna take my shots while I have them. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, but it's like, then why did you bring in Choupo-Moting if you're gonna go sign a striker? Like, what role is he supposed to play then?
Uh,
He's not exactly like some creator at the 10 spot.
I think it's gonna be one of those things where if you sit him in the tent and be like, hey man, you don't need to run all the time. You can just sit there and play combinations with Morgan and Forsberg and that. Just don't lose the ball. I think he'd be all right for that. And then get into the box for late crosses. I think he'd be fine with that. But I do want to just make a change that Julian Quinones is in Saudi Arabia, not Qatar. My apologies. I looked at the team name was Al Qadish, so I saw Qadish and I was like, oh, or Qadsia, Al Qadsia. My apologies. So, but he does have 15 goals and 4 assists in 19 games there. So he's clearly playing at a level that would translate all right over here, even though the Saudi Pro League's not nearly at our level. But anyways,
They're washed unless you ask Cristiano Ronaldo.
yeah, 40 years old, still
I
running around.
saw
Is
I
like,
saw
yeah,
I saw an
this is a
athletic
good
interview with him.
level. Oh, did you really?
I saw yeah. They did it. He did an interview with somebody in Saudi. And they, like, of course, they asked him, they're like, oh, what do you think of, how do you compare the Saudi Pro League to a league like, oh, I don't know, MLS? And he was like, the guy was like, oh, the Saudi League's better, right? And he was like, obviously. Like, oh yeah, like, you just conveniently picked the league of your arch nemesis is in, and then just completely not paid to say that, oh yeah, it's obviously a better league. Yeah, okay, sure.
Poor
I mean, maybe the
Pinaldo.
top like two or three teams or something, but
Yeah, I stopped doing this whole comparison thing because it's always the same thing. You've got half the people who are like, yeah, the majority of our teams can compete with the majority of other teams in any league, but we just can't compete with the tops because they spend, $100 million. And like, well, the tops are all that matters for the people who do that. Like Man United would still blow out, even though they're 13th, they'd blow out any MLS team, blah, 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 blah. It's like, Okay, I'm
Yeah,
tired. I'm tired
obviously.
of this. Yeah, I'm tired of this. So I stopped doing that.